Hi, my name is Meredith Nelson, and I chose to review the geometry TEKS because I am an advanced high school geometry teacher. While going through the TEKS, or the explicit curriculum, I noticed that I guess all of them start with the student will be able to, and then the three main words that follow are either describe, identify, or apply. So while there are some application problems, I would say that very little of what we actually teach has to do with applications. Yes, we are applying the concepts that we're learning, but we're not applying them to real life applications like you would think, which I think is a big discrepancy between the explicit curriculum and what should actually be taught in STEM curriculum. I think the STEM curriculum should be reflective of those real world applications, and that would make the content more relevant to the students, which would help them retain more information and actually get a better understanding of not only advanced geometry but other STEM subjects. That being said, I would argue that teachers are not fully prepared to teach STEM education. Like I said, the TEKS are indicative of this. They don't tell us how to incorporate those four subjects together. And STEM is an integration of those four subjects. That's how many people define STEM. I know some people define it as like science class, technology class, engineering, and math class. But the reality is that real STEM is all four of those combined together. So without proper explicit curriculum, I don't think that teachers are properly prepared to teach what STEM really is. The next thing I want to address is what is actually taught in STEM classes, more specifically, what is taught in math classes. So to start off, usually math teachers do rely on the TEKS in my experience. We do a pretty good job following them. We try to adhere to them as much as possible. So the explicit curriculum should be the same for everybody. The taught curriculum, however, varies from teacher to teacher, school to school, district to district, right? Like not every advanced geometry teacher is teaching the same lesson on the same day in the same amount of time, in the same way, right? Different methods of delivery. You could do it virtually, you could do it in partner groups, you could just like get up there and teach it. Like there are a lot of ways to deliver that instruction and a lot of different ideas or implementations of the materials. So the taught curriculum varies, right? And that's not just teacher to teacher. Like my taught curriculum varies period to period. I have different audiences and I know how to cater to each of them by now. And so maybe in second period, I do group work because they learn better by working with their peers or collaborating. And maybe in sixth period, I get up there and I do all the instruction together because they're very quiet and they would prefer if I just got up there and then they do their own thing afterwards. So the learned curriculum, or the taught curriculum, varies day to day, teacher to teacher, whatever. The learned curriculum also varies from student to student, which is very evident, right? Like we give them homework assignments and tests, and we're able to see kind of how their brains process that information, what they were able to retain, maybe how they were able to retain it if they give you like work or anything, scratch work. So what is being taught, or what should be taught, varies a lot from what is actually taught and how it's taught and how it is perceived by the students. I feel like the teachers of non-STAR tested subjects and STAR tested subjects interpret the explicit curriculum a little bit differently. I actually teach both. I teach Algebra 1 and Advanced Geometry. In Advanced Geometry, yes, we've been going through our TEKS and we've been like eliminating some content that doesn't necessarily have to do with them and adding content that does have to do with them. But we're able to determine the amount of time we spend on them, how much depth we go into, and we're allowed to like set the standard there in Advanced Geometry. Like how high do we want them to go? How deep do we want to go with it? Stuff like that. In Algebra 1, I would say it's very different. We have to adhere to those TEKS and we have to go in depth. We have to make sure that those students understand those TEKS to a T because we never know what's coming on those STAR tests. We can look at old STAR tests and try and figure out what they might ask, but at the end of the day, all of that is fair game. So we have to get those students prepared as much as possible. So in conclusion, I would say that if you're teaching a non-STAR subject, then the explicit curriculum can be interpreted a little bit more loose But if you are teaching a STAR tested subject, you should, not necessarily always, but you should adhere to that explicit curriculum and interpret it very strictly. I do not believe that students actually learn STEM in STEM subjects. To me, and based on what I've read so far, STEM is a combination of science, technology, engineering, and math, rather than just classes being taught separately. But I guarantee you my students probably don't even know that difference. I bet you anything, if you ask them like, oh, are you in a STEM class? They would say, yeah, I'm in biology and I'm in math. Which, yes, those are STEM subjects, but I don't think they collectively describe or teach what STEM is as a whole. So I don't think there's any real STEM curriculum that's explicitly given to us. So I think not only does the explicit curriculum lag there, but so does our taught curriculum and the learned curriculum, because we're not teaching the right things, they're not learning the right things, which is very evident. Like I said, if you ask any of my kids, they'd be like, oh yeah, I'm in STEM, but are they really? Like, they're enrolled in STEM courses, but not courses that actually teach STEM. The next question I want to address does the explicit curriculum actually tell you what to teach about STEM? I would argue that no, the explicit curriculum or the TEKS does not tell us what to teach about STEM itself. It does an okay job at telling us what to teach within our STEM subjects, like what standards we need to meet, not super specifically, but it does list them out for us, so that's nice. But like I said, STEM as a whole is science, technology, engineering, and math all combined together and being integrated and used in each other's classrooms. And that is why I would argue that the TEKS do not tell us to do that or how to do that. So I don't think that the explicit curriculum tells us what we actually need to be teaching about real STEM. At the end of the day, I know it's a lot to go back and revise the TEKS, so there are some other things that teachers could do on their end that could help promote real STEM application. I think that starts with teachers in STEM, like science teachers and math teachers, getting their classes to be more project-based and more research-based. That way they're integrating some other skills in there, and then also like reaching out to each other, like, hey, how can the math and science teachers work together to make units that incorporate whatever the two of them are working on? It's not impossible. It could be hard to do sometimes, but I think that's an idea. And also just have more hands-on experiences like within the classroom. I know I am really bad about that. Assigning projects or just other things besides homework assignments, to be honest. It can be hard for me to step out of my comfort zone and do that, but I know that in order to achieve that full STEM curriculum, those students need to be exposed to that, and I think it would do them a lot of good in the long run. So just to have some more hands-on experiences and to try and close that gap between the standards and what is actually being taught, because clearly there's some friction there, right, especially in non-STAR tested subjects. So just work on closing those gaps and presenting the material that is more closely related to the explicit curriculum. I think in order to improve the STEM curriculum to actually teach STEM, the TEKS or the explicit curriculum need to incorporate other aspects of STEM. So for instance, my geometry TEKS should include like some real world applications that might have to do with engineering, science, or technology. And same with those other subjects, like science needs to have math incorporations, and they all kind of need to be woven together. So I would say that the explicit curriculum should be more specific and also just include like how to incorporate those things or standards that would require teachers to do that and actually teach STEM.